Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Play, Pause, Rewind. This is episode 69 of our show. Nice.
Ha! Nice.
Yeah. And, so we're back. We're talking about another movie. Niles, how have you been the last couple weeks since we last recorded?
Been good. Spent some time seeing some family up in the mountains, and just getting ready for moving. And
Yeah.
I gotta say, moving sucks.
It
I'm
does.
Not enjoying
It's the
it.
worst.
Nope. I'm not a fan of it. But otherwise, it's been business as usual and been enjoying life wherever I can. How about you, Dylan?
Oh, pretty good. Was hosting some family this weekend, so that was nice. And otherwise, just chilling out, working and watching movies and stuff like that. But it's
Dope.
yeah, been a pretty good time. And this week, we are talking about a movie. We're talking about Blue Beetle. And as always, we'll do a couple minutes non-spoilers, and then we'll move into full spoilers after that. And if you didn't know, and if you haven't seen it, because most people apparently haven't, which is kind of a bummer, Blue Beetle is the latest DC superhero film and the first film in James Gunn's new DC universe, even though I think this was made before he officially took over and all of that. But the film is directed by Ángel Manuel Soto, written by Gareth Junet Alcocer, and stars Zola Maridueña, Bruna Marquezine, Becky G, George Lopez, Belisa Escobedo, and Susan Sarandon. The film follows Jaime Reyes as he returns home to the fictional city of Palmera City, Texas, where he is secretly given an alien scarab, like a little beetle thingy, that attaches itself to his back and grants him alien superpowers. Niles, what are your initial thoughts on Blue Beetle?
I'm overall positive on this movie. I think we have had such. I feel like just this whole year, it's just been one superhero movie after the next between like Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then
Flash.
The Flash. Across the Spider-Verse. James Gunn's other movie, Guardians of the Galaxy 3. It's like there's just been so much this year, so it's difficult to try and not compare all of them against one another, because that's kind of what happens at the end of the day, I feel like, within this genre. But I feel that this movie is just, it's genuine. It feels genuine. It feels authentic. It doesn't feel like it's watered down by like studio interference. It's my understanding that the writer and director had like a lot of creative freedom and liberty with this movie. That's my understanding. But so I'm very positive on it overall. I just think that there's some small bits of the movie, like superhero tropes and some plot points, and some inconsistencies that kind of hurt it a little bit and make it fall short of excellence. But I think it's still a pretty great movie. What about you, Dylan?
Yes, I had a really good time with this. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I didn't have expectations really in any direction going into it, but I had a really good time. And we saw this yesterday on National Cinema Day, which prompted a pretty full theater for us. Woo! And it seemed like everyone else in the theater was having a really good time, too. I liked all the characters. I liked the family. I thought everyone was doing a great job, and I really was invested in what this group of people was going through. It was also nice to see a romance starring actors with solid romantic chemistry in a genre that has become increasingly sexless over the years for some reason. I don't.
That's fair.
I don't have really many negatives, and I don't know if this movie. I don't have many negatives, but I do have one main one, and I don't know if it was the movie or just the projector in our theater, but the whole thing was like dim. I felt like the whole movie needed its brightness turned up like 3 or 4 points. And I don't know why it looked like that, because visually the movie looked fine otherwise. But do you remember 15 years ago and before or whatever, when scenes that were at night were just like very well lit but blue? You remember that?
Yeah.
You remember how nice that was when you could see what was happening at night in a movie? Because I couldn't see what was happening in a lot of this movie, and it was by far the biggest frustration I had with it, because otherwise I liked this a lot. And I hope it does better than it's been doing.
Yeah, no, I agree there because I think that they're especially towards the end, like the climax on the island. There is a lot of there's a lot of stuff outside, and yeah,
Hmm.
it was very hard to see what was going on. So
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. But yeah, one of the things that I like seeing too in this movie was just some familiar faces. You know,
Hmm.
it's always just nice to see those people that you recognize, like George Lopez. Like when he popped up on screen, it's like, oh my god, I remember. Like one of the first times I ever saw a movie of yours, and I think that first one was actually Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
Okay.
Like when I like recognized him, I'm like, that's George Lopez. So just kind of my own personal callbacks in my head, but I
Yeah.
also like seeing Harvey Yuen. I think that's how
Hmm.
you pronounce his last name. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I'm terrible at that sometimes, but he plays Dr. Sanchez in this movie, and I recognize him from What We Do in the Shadows, which is an
Hmm.
excellent film. So I just always, I love him as an actor. He's fantastic up there.
Yeah, and I will say too, this is kind of coming at a time where I'm not a huge believer in the concept of superhero fatigue, but I think there is fatigue in the genre right now, just because a lot of the recent entries in the genre have not been very good. It's been a weak run, aside from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Across the Spider-Verse. Like, the DC universe and the Marvel universe have not been at their strongest recently, and there's this weird. I don't think general audiences even know about James Gunn taking over and starting a new universe, but there is, for people in the know, confusion about what's going on at DC right now. So you know, it's this movie's in a tough spot, but I think it does a pretty good job telling its story.
Yeah, it is in a tough spot, and it's an interesting character to throw up there on the big screen too, because it's not one of those big names like
Right.
Batman or Superman or anything like that. Like Blue Beetle is one that I don't think a lot of people are familiar with too. Like if you're not familiar with James Gunn taking over the DC universe, you're not going to be familiar with Blue Beetle. Maybe you will, but it's just nice to see this representation on screen and bringing this underappreciated but loved character
Hmm.
to the screen. I am familiar with Blue Beetle through Young Justice, the TV
Okay.
series, the animated DC series, and I love that his whole arc in the second season of that show. That was my
Hmm.
first introduction to the character, and that's really been my only exposure to the character. But he's got this fantastic arc as like this very prime or this very central moving force behind the narrative in the second season of the show, and I think just go watch it, everyone. It's so great. But
Yeah.
I did want to see this character explored a little bit more on screen through some other adaptations, and so here we go with Blue Beetle.
Hmm. Yep, and is the version of the character in that show the Jaime Reyes version as well?
It is. It
Okay.
is. Yeah. And
Yeah.
they've got. I think it's been a while since I've seen the show, but I'm pretty sure that they know about the past Blue Beetles and everything like
Hmm.
that. So yeah.
Cool.
And I will also say too that it is great to see, like, since we're talking about all these different superhero movies, it's just nice to see one that isn't based in New York.
Hmm.
You know, like
Yeah.
I I feel like so many of these superhero movies, especially the MCU, they're just like
Hmm.
it's always just New York. You're walking down the streets of New York, and yeah, you move around, but it's based there.
Hmm.
But here we're kind of based in this fictional city, Palermo City, and it's I think it's based on El Paso. But you do see some kind of neat visual distinction with this city too. It kind of feels like it's Miami Beach in some ways, with the cyberpunk sci-fi aesthetic blended in.
Yes, I got very Miami vibes too from it, and apparently this is not based on El Paso. The comic
Oh,
is, and they thought about setting it in El Paso, but I don't know what this is based on because I got Miami vibes, and I thought they said they lived in the Keys at one point, which I assumed
yeah.
Florida Keys, those islands that go off of Florida. But apparently it's meant to be in Texas. But El Paso is not on the coast, which is why I say it's not El Paso. Like, it's a very landlocked city.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I don't know where it's meant to be, but it's I do enjoy that element of DC where, like, the real world cities exist too, but all of the normal, like, DC everyday stuff happens in fake cities that are kind of similar to various real cities. And
Yeah.
this continues that tradition. So we get a fictional Miami and Texas, and that's where this movie takes place. But
Radical. Love it.
yeah.
But
Well, we got some themes about sort of economic disparity and gentrification going on here, class politics, immigration, and a lot more stuff. And this movie is very heavy on representation for Hispanic people, specifically, I think, Mexican immigrants, which is really nice to see in the genre. And there are a lot of little jokes and references in there that we did not get because we are the whitest people ever, maybe.
Yep.
But there was a
I don't know
middle-aged...
about ever, but yes.
Ever, okay, that's true. But there was a middle-aged Hispanic couple sitting next to me, and they were having the best time. So I think a lot of those references and jokes like really landed the way they were supposed to. I wish they talked a little bit less sitting right next to me, but it's like they were having such a good time, you can't even be mad about it, you know?
Yeah. No, I heard them too. They were cackling at all the jokes, like obviously all those the pop cultural stuff, the historical references from, the Mexican American viewpoint really landed home, I think, with them. And I feel like it's going to land home with a lot of people in the Hispanic community. So yeah, it is disappointing to see that this movie is performing so poorly at the box office,
Yes, I agree. It's like, because it's good. I like it, and I want good movies to do well, and I would like to see these characters again. I like them, so I hope there's solid word of mouth, and the movie has some legs at the box office. I'm worried because I think they already announced that they're going to put it on streaming soon, but if you... I don't like, and studios got to stop doing this. It's ridiculous. I don't understand it, but I think it's pretty good, and I know there's a lot of good stuff out right now, a lot to choose from. It's a very healthy, like, theatrical environment, despite what is going on behind the scenes with the higher-ups in the industry. But yeah, like, if you like the genre, I would go see this. It's not going to blow you away or anything, because it is kind of tropey, but, like, it is a very well-executed one of these movies if you like these movies, is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think it delivers on what it promises to be, and yeah, it's just finally time that we have this kind of representation on screen too.
Yeah, very interestingly, as the genre has sort of had a wind down, then the studios start putting the representation in more and more. I wonder if that's intentional.
Who knows?
Yeah. You want to do spoilers?
Yeah, let's jump into spoilers.
Cool.
For this movie.
Yeah. So I appreciated the very overt and early introduced theme of how, like, a city of progress or moving forward or improving a neighborhood is it's never about helping the people that are there, It's always about, and it's really just a precursor to the wealthy or these corporations moving in and essentially stealing land from the residents, and they've just replaced overt violence with economic flexing to do so. And I think that speaks very much true to the real world, and it's really this idea that progress, as the wealthy talk about it, it's not for the people that live in an area. It's not for you, it's for them, because it makes them more money. And I just thought that was, it's not subtle, but it's handled honestly, I think.
I agree. Well, the main antagonist of this movie, the Victoria, who's like
Cord.
I can't exactly remember her role, but she's like, higher up in the Zord Industries. And by the way, Zord, ridiculous. Cord, thank you. Cord, Zord, same thing to me.
Yeah.
But
if you're gonna make fun of a fictional character name, just get the right name. Otherwise, we'll get in trouble.
Yeah, that's true. But she's I think she just kept repeating that line over and over again, that like progress requires sacrifice.
Yes.
And I think that directly reflects what you're talking about there, like progress. Who's the progress for, and who's giving the sacrifices, and what do those look like exactly? Like, she was never the person giving any sacrifices. She was expecting everyone else to make these sacrifices more or less unwillingly,
Right. Well, and it kind of reminds me of like when a company is doing layoffs or something, and the executive gets on the call and he's like, look, I mean, things are tough, and you have to make like really tough decisions as a business leader. It's like, it's interesting how it's never you that has to suffer for this tough decision that you had to make, and how this call is all about you and how hard it was for you to make this tough decision that affects other people's lives.
Just, I can't believe I'm retaining my salary and everything and my benefits, but I have to let go of so many people.
I know.
Such a hard decision.
I gave myself a bigger bonus this year than last year, but it was really tough for me to end your life, like livelihood.
Better luck next year.
Yeah, but it does balance that pretty serious world-building element with a lot of comedy. There is a lot of great comedy in this movie, mostly centered around Jaime's family. The grandma is the best, right?
Oh, Nana is amazing. She was probably my favorite. That her and Rudy. I mean, I think they're the standouts for the comedic elements here, because I feel like the family is such a big pillar here. Like I was half expecting Vin Diesel to come in and be like family,
Oh, God.
but that's a whole other kind of thing there. But I think Nana was my favorite. She's got so many good moments, like like she's got the whole Gatling gun, and she just mows down these people, and it's like, oh yeah, it's kind of implied that you're a former revolutionary or like some kind of Zapista type character. It's like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, the like, how are you holding that so perfectly moment where the sister is like, wait, why are you good at this? What are you? And then she's like, there's a lot you don't know about my past, or something like that. It's great, and it's like, that's something that's not done a whole lot in like big movies. It's like the family or grandparent character. It's like they aren't always implied to have had like major life events before the story. They kind of exist in their narrative role, and that's it. But it's kind of like, oh yeah, you had a whole story before this movie, like well before this movie took place, and I thought that was really fun.
Oh, I love it. And I mean, it's kind of the perfect way to like kind of subvert that, like the training montage or anything like that. It's like, okay, yes, you know how to fire a gun, because let's just write that into your character. It's like a D&D, just give him just a big backstory and then slowly drip it out over time. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of humor in this movie, and I think it's especially relevant for Hispanic and Mexican American communities. They referenced movies and TV shows that you and I aren't familiar with, but there was, I think some of it still landed in some regards for us. Like, they talked about that soap opera. I think it's a soap opera, Maria La del Barrio.
And I love the element too where the sister Milagro is talking about that, and then one of the other family members also references a soap opera about Maria that's like the same tropes, except it's a different show, and they're like, oh my god, you're right, it's just like that one too. And they had this shared understanding, which I think is probably like a thing in a lot of immigrant communities. Like, they have this tighter shared culture across generations than we might, because they're, they've come over together and they're like in these communities of people with more shared experience. And I just thought that was really fun. And it showed like their tightness as a family unit as well, that they have all these shared cultural like touch points that they all enjoy.
Yeah. No, I appreciated that. And, the cartoon, it's just great to see that kind of those references there, and I think a lot of people will appreciate them. There are also some good visual gags in this movie too, like some good setup, and then the visual gag pays off as a good joke, like the massive beachside mansion.
Yes, yeah, it's like Jaime tells his sister, it's like, don't worry, I'm going to get us out of here, and we're going to be like living in this massive beachside mansion. And then it cuts to him standing in exactly the same way he just described, wearing sunglasses and nice looking clothes. And then the reveal is that, oh, he's a pool boy, and she got him a job there cleaning gum from underneath the table. And I also love the joke that builds upon that, where she is putting more gum under the table just so there is more work for them to do. I thought that was funny as well.
It's very clever.
Yeah. But
and I love that the recurring joke of the lab assistant, Dr. Sanchez, but that's not his real name. He keeps telling
she's just racist.
She keeps telling her, it's not my name. Come on.
Hmm.
But I can totally see that happening, and like corporate settings and those kind of things. But one thing that I did notice in the movie, just because I've been watching What We Do in the Shadows, so when he
Hmm.
says his full name, it ends in De La Cruz, I
Okay.
believe, and that's the same last name as his character in What We Do in the Shadows. Which
Oh, okay. That's fun.
I'm not sure if they planned that or not, but I thought that was neat to draw that relation there.
Yeah, and that actually happens again with Jaime when he's trying to check into the building to meet Jenny.
Mm-hmm.
The receptionist just keeps calling him Jamie and ignoring him when he's correcting her, just to play on, like white corporate America, just always whitening is not the right word, but sort of just pushing people into the white hegemonic norm within the corporate setting. Like a lot of people's names get mispronounced and then everyone just rolls with it and moves on. And that's not cool.
Yeah,
But a big strength of this movie is the family unit around Jaime. Like he's a great protagonist,
family.
but yeah, the family really sticks out and they're all really fun characters and they all have enough personality for what their role is in the movie. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Everyone, Jamie, Alberto, Milagro, the mother, Nana, Rudy, they all have these very distinct personalities,
Hmm.
and they did feel like real people to me.
Hmm.
All their interactions did feel genuine and authentic. They felt charming. Uh, Feels like they kind of leaned on each other, and it felt like a real family too, because they would switch between Spanish and English on like a dime. Like all of a sudden there would
Hmm.
be one sentence that language and then the next, and that felt real to me. Like yeah,
Yep.
families do that sometimes. And when you grow up in like a bilingual household, you're gonna do that. And then they
Hmm.
sing those same theme songs together from the TV shows, just like how a real family might too. So I appreciated that, and I think a lot of families, because I feel like I could see some elements of my family in this family here, and I feel like a lot of people can too, even if
Hmm.
you didn't grow up in a Hispanic community. You do kind of have some out there uncles or relatives who are
Yeah,
paranoid
Rudy.
or anti-government,
Hmm.
anti-establishment kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Batman's a fascist kind of deal, like you know.
People got so mad at that line when it was said online. It's like
Really?
it's a joke. Yeah, well, yeah. And like the idea of Batman being a fascist is like really chronically online and silly, but it's like that's part of who this character is supposed to be. He's kind of a crank in a lot of ways, but I do like the element that he's very competent as well, and he's good at what he does. He just has some like crazy beliefs as well. But he gets a fancy job at the end. He gets a new truck. George Lopez is really good in this. I thought he was a lot of fun in
Yes,
this
George
role.
Lopez knocks it out of the park, and I think all of them do have deliver great performances. But
Yeah.
I also appreciated how the family, because this was a very different superhero movie in the fact that like it's not just like one superhero trying to
Hmm.
navigate these trials and tribulations. It feels like a whole family doing it
Yes.
together, because he transforms, he gains his powers right in front of his family. So there's never a secret that he's transformed. It's like everyone knows that
Yeah,
he's
it
got these
happens right in
powers
front of
now.
them.
And
Yeah.
so it felt like kind of more of a comprehensive picture.
Hmm. And I really appreciated that they don't get left by the wayside as the movie goes on. It, like
Yes.
when Jaime starts being a superhero and doing that type of stuff in a lot of movies, the family that's around him would sort of fall back into the background and he would be introduced to new characters. That doesn't really happen here. In fact, they are the ones who have to save him at the end of the movie because he gets captured. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's and he does his own fighting and stuff too. But that's kind of a flip on what we're used to in the genre. The family of the superhero having to rescue them from being captured is cool. I thought it was great. Um, and
Yes.
and yeah, it's like they grieve and they have their emotional processing that they do. But you have a note here that is really great about how they do that.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I think as a family, they recognized eventually after their house burning down and Jaime getting captured, they were like, it's
and the
time to
dad
fight.
dying.
yeah, the dad dying, like all this bad stuff had happened to them, and they're like, we've turned the cheek too many times. Like we turned both
Hmm.
cheeks. It's time to actually fight. And they, kind of compartmentalized the grief for a second and said, we got to go help this guy, like our son. They did that, and
Hmm.
then once it was done, they were like, all right, now we can let ourselves grieve and feel this loss and this emotion, and that I just appreciated that. That felt genuine to me, and how
Yeah.
a real family might behave if you lose a loved one, but you have to go get someone else and bring them to the funeral, get them to
Hmm.
come, some kind of deal like that.
Right. Well, and I appreciated that it wasn't done in a like you have to bottle up your emotions like in a toxic sort of way. It was Nana being like, "We have to do this. We have to grieve, but we can't right now. There's stuff we have to do, and we have to get that done, and then we'll have time to
Mm-hmm.
feel what we need to feel." And I loved the movie follows up on that. It's like when they're all rescued, she's like, "Now it's time to grieve," and they all do their
Yes.
hug, and it's very sweet. And that's something that some of the weaker, more recent Marvel movies are failing to do. Like this movie is very sincere. It's
Mm-hmm.
comedic, but it is earnest and it wears its emotions on its sleeve. It's about family and love and like sticking together and community, and it doesn't shy away from any of that. It's not afraid to be sincere. Um,
Yeah.
and on the note of sincerity, we have Jaime, who is a really solid, good guy protagonist, I think. He's coming back from college. He's all excited. He's the first person in his family to graduate college, and then everything has gone to shit for his family, and he's just like doing the best he can, and then gets put in this really uncomfortable position, I would say.
Yes.
um, but he always like is doing the best he can to make the best out of the situation, right? And he doesn't even hold a grudge against Jenny after initially being upset because like he recognizes that she didn't mean for this to happen to him. It was just kind of an impulsive decision and she didn't know that it would pan out this way. Like he's a very reasonable guy given the situation he's put in, I would say.
Yeah. He rolls with the punches, but yeah, it feels he does feel very sincere. He's also
Hmm.
very charismatic, which helps him out a lot on screen, and
Yep.
helps out with like the chemistry with his co-lead too. So yeah, I thought he did a great or the it was just yeah he did a great job as a protagonist.
Hmm. Yeah, but let's get into some negatives a little bit. You have some
Yeah,
inconsistencies and things that bothered you here, so let's dive into those a little
yeah,
bit.
there. Yeah, I think we're very positive on this film overall, but it's not perfect, and no film ever is. But I think there are some things that kind of stuck out to me on the drive home, and today I was
Hmm.
thinking about it a little bit. You know, there was this whole plot point, or not a plot point, but just this whole thing with Jaime, where he doesn't want to kill people. Like the scarab suit keeps telling him like, oh, let's use this weapon and it's gonna fucking
Hmm.
kill someone. And he's like, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 like non-lethal like means just like let's get them out of here. But his family didn't fucking share that sentiment at all. Like. Like
Yeah.
the grandma is literally mowing people down with a Gatling gun. The Beetle machine's like stomping on people and like
Hmm.
skewering them literally. And it's
Yeah.
like, why is this value not shared by everyone in the family? If we're gonna
Hmm.
kind of put this emphasis on it in the film of like who we're gonna kill and who we aren't gonna kill, but
Right.
small thing,
Yeah,
you
it
know.
didn't bother me, but I did notice it. Like when Rudy steps on the guy and skewers him, he's like, "Ah, I stepped on a guy." It's like it is a little tonally dissonant with what Jaime is going through, especially at the end when he almost kills a guy and then is held back. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't like if that is meant to be a theme, it doesn't totally add up because it's inconsistent throughout the movie. But
Yeah,
it's it doesn't bother me all that much, even though I recognize it is a little bit of a problem.
yeah, me too. It's like it's just like one small thing. It's kind of looking at the forest through the trees, whatever.
Hmm.
But yeah, then there was like another thing too that I was pondering a little bit. So Jaime, as I understand it, his college education was like a pre-law degree,
Yeah.
right? That's what I remember hearing in the movie. But he didn't go to graduate school, so he can't be a lawyer. And it didn't sound like he really knew his next steps. So it was just kind of thinking about it, like what exactly was he hoping to do with the education? I understand that he's trying to use you know improved income, like a better job to support his family and help them, get out of their, financial insecurities. But it's just kind of unclear to me, like, why did you choose to become a lawyer when so much schooling is needed? But maybe I'm reading into it too much. But I think you could have made maybe one small switch, maybe to the degree a little bit, and then you could have integrated it back into the movie a little bit, because like he never really used his college education at all in the movie to solve a problem or anything like that, and that's okay. You don't always need to use your education to solve something, but I feel like that they mentioned it earlier in the movie, and so much kind of emphasis was placed on him having that hat at the airport and everything. It was like, maybe they could have found a way to weave that into the plot, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just grasping at straws.
Well, no, I think you're just getting it backwards, because I think that actually is the point.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it's tying into the theme of like the rich moving in and taking all this land and pricing people out and messing with the poor immigrant people who come there or live there. Like he's the first person in his family to go to college. That could be a huge economic step forward, but they probably didn't have. He probably went to pre-law because lawyers make a lot of money, and he wanted to get his family out of the financial situation they're in. But because their landlord tripled their rent, he now has to stay and help his family financially, because they can't afford to send him to law school anymore and stuff like that. And also just all of these circumstances, like they aren't able to help him get that last step to get that job, because they're through circumstances outside of their own control. Like, they just can't make it happen. They got to save their house. They have to take care of his dad's health because he had a heart attack. And I think that is the point. It's like he got as far as he's economically going to be allowed to get, even though he made it so far, if that makes sense. So I think, like,
That
you're
makes
right
sense.
to call it out, but I don't think it's a flaw so much as part of the commentary itself.
I agree. No, when you put it like that, that makes a lot more sense, because I think it is just more about him getting the degree and having that achievement. It's not necessarily about him using that knowledge to support his family. Then in this movie, it's like he accomplished something big, and I think that's just the main takeaway there.
Right. And I had one thing too. It's not an inconsistency, but I would have liked to see a little bit more back and forth between Jaime and Kajida, the scarab. I know we talked about tropes being a little too present and sort of over stuffed here. Actually, we're about to talk about that, but you mentioned
we'll get
it.
into that in just a second.
Yeah, sorry, I misorganized the notes. But like even just the cliche of them developing a little bit of a bond early on and then having a falling out and then coming back together in the third act to really kick some ass, like, would have hit a little bit better and been nice. Or maybe have him express more resentment to her early on, because she does kind of just attach herself to him for life without his permission or like consultation at all. That's pretty that's not like a chill thing to do, right?
Consent is sexy.
Yeah, exactly. And like Jaime realizing his potential as the Blue Beetle was still satisfying for other reasons, mostly because the scene with him and his dad was really good. But the dynamic between Kajida and Jaime doesn't really, like, it's just not really put to the test all that much. So when they finally sync up, it doesn't hit as hard as I would like it to. You know what I mean?
That's fair. I get what you mean. In Young Justice, I remember it being more of a thing, like a struggle between Jaime and the Scarab. I can't remember all the details, but like the Scarab kind of takes over his body basically and pushes him into like the recesses of the mind for like a few episodes at least. So it's like the Scarab's in full control, and Jaime is just kind of watching it go through the motions and embody him as a person. And that could have been a cool dynamic to explore on screen, but there's only so much time in a 2-hour movie.
Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about the tropes a little bit. You have a couple notes about those here.
Yeah, because like I said, it's not a perfect movie. I think the thing that really drags this movie down is that it is a little too dependent upon some of these superhero tropes that have been established in the genre. You know, you have this, for example, I'll just name off a few. It's an evil corporation is the antagonist, and they're evil because of money, you know, kind of deal. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that any of these tropes are bad things necessarily. It's just I feel like this movie is a little hindered by it. Like, you know, just because the genre is so saturated, you know, the protagonist here also gets his powers from a bug in a corporate building. Super Spider-Man. But that's no big deal either. The hero gets the girl by the end of the movie. That's also a little bit of a trope. And I know that you said you liked that, and I honestly don't mind it, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then also, you know, like the protagonist's mentor figure dies at the lowest point in the movie. It's like this keeps happening in these superhero movies.
Yeah.
And
it's definitely a cliche. It's my favorite cliche. I love it's my favorite cliche. I love the mentor dying at the midpoint or the like lowest point, because then the hero has to step up on their own 2 feet. You know, I know it's a cliche and it happens all the fucking time, but it's my favorite cliche. It's the mentor kicking the bucket.
You know, a trope is a trope because it works. You know, people keep using it and it keeps coming back because something there is working. So, you know, I just think if this movie has a lot of originality and has a lot of great ideas and heart and, you know, ingenuity as well, it's like I feel like in the superhero genre there's a lot of reason to just stretch out, try something new, explore new boundaries, and, you know, it is hard to break out of these tropes. I'll give it that.
Yeah, and just speaking of the genre it's in, I will also say the action set pieces were like the least memorable part of the movie. Aside from him making a big anime Buster sword, very dope. I like none of the action beats stand out to me at all, I don't think. It's kind of like Miss Marvel in that way, where like all of the fresh stuff showcasing a different culture typically not shown in the genre, and all the character stuff and all their interpersonal dynamics was the fun stuff, and the superhero stuff was the like lame part of both of them. Even though I felt it was a little bit better in this, and while I do agree with you that the movie is extremely tropey, it has like all of the tropes of the genre. I think the change in perspective to be a family of Mexican immigrants, some of whom are explicitly mentioned to be undocumented, made this feel much more fresh than it would have otherwise. You even get a scene of Uncle Rudy talking to Jaime about the experience of living as an undocumented migrant for so many years. And he talks about, it's like, yeah, crossing the border is hard, but it's like what comes next is harder. And like the fact that that's being talked about in a way that is framing the person who led them across the border as a heroic and brave person is kind of awesome to see in a mainstream like blockbuster movie, especially with like I'm from Texas, and the sentiment towards immigrants in my home state is fucking cruel and vile, and it's just nice to see like they are treated with dignity and kindness here in this big movie. I liked that. I thought it was great. And I think just them being who they are sets this movie apart from the genre, despite how tropey it is, you know?
Absolutely. And I think the family dynamic is one of the better parts of this movie, and I think it is the heart and soul of this movie. Like I said earlier, like the fact that we've never seen that before in a movie where like everyone in the family recognizes that he's a superhero at the same time. You know, it's like, I feel like it's always a secret that you got to keep hush hush from your parents or something like that for the majority of the movie, or you never even tell them at all. And it's just kind of this whole like, you got your alias or your secret identity the whole time, and in this movie it's like, nope, we're not even going to deal with any of that because this is a family, and in this family there are no secrets.
Well, and they pressure him into getting in the situation in the first place. Like, he's listening to Jenny and he's not going to open it, and then they're like, oh, come on, do it, you got to do it. And like everyone's reaction to what happens next is very funny too, and they all have their own distinct reactions. It's great. I like it. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
And at what point is it when the Nana is just like sewing and then all the power goes out and she just like flips on the little light and keeps going?
Yeah. I don't remember, but yeah, I love that bit.
It's so good. It's really fucking funny. And yeah, I think I mentioned it before, but I just really love that they all stay involved in the movie for the whole time. They're all a part of the story, and they're there beginning to end. And the Nana just like goes fucking crazy on all the corporate police people.
She's nuts. But speaking of corporate, do we want to talk about our antagonist, the villain?
Yes.
Victoria Cord.
Yep. Perfectly serviceable evil business lady. There's not a lot of depth here.
Yep.
Definitely not a character that is necessarily worthy of being played by Susan Sarandon, but she's completely serviceable for this story that is not really about her. I kind of think she's more an archetype representing evil corporations who are obsessed with money and military contracts and stuff like that, more than she is a complete character. There's that one element of her like feeling slighted that Ted Cord gets the company instead of her, but that's kind of it. She's fine. There's not a lot to say about her.
She's perfectly fine as an archetype, and everything that she does makes her evil in this movie, so it works out well. And I mean, our main antagonist more so, would be the Carapax, the kind of the OMAC.
He's the muscle.
Yeah,
OMAC,
the muscle,
I think is the acronym.
OMAC or whatever the fuck that armor system was called. I was kind of pleasantly surprised with how they dealt with this character because I think we talked about this a little bit before recording, that for the whole film he's kind of this the muscle guy, the guy that Jaime has to fight, and right before Jaime like kills him, we get this brief perspective on his life, and it's fascinating. It really is, because we find out that Ignacio Carapax, he was actually brought up by the School of Americas, which was run by the U.S. Army, which, it was, I don't understand it fully. I did a little bit of research on it, but it was basically the school where they trained, assassins, soldiers, and others to kind of destabilize governments.
To be Contras, basically, right?
Yes, to be Contras.
He brought up as counter-revolutionary, basically, it seemed like.
Yeah.
But
we get a lot
that's what we did in the region for the whole of the latter half of the 20th century, if you didn't know. America's in the business of destabilizing governments, specifically in South and Central America. Our government loves to do that because they were trying to nationalize key industries and socialize and stuff like that. And American corporations said, we will kill you, and we will put a fascist dictator in place who's friendly to American business interest. We have done it all the time, and that's kind of what was being showcased here and what happened to him. Like, he's a victim.
Yep, he was a victim. Like, his family was taken from him, and it just added depth to this character, depth that I don't think that we often get to see at that level, and that quickly, too, with these kinds of antagonists. He just became victimized and weaponized, and his entire life, it feels like he's been kind of a prisoner to this corporation and to America at the same time.
Yeah, and I remember, like, 3/4 of the way through the movie, I was thinking he was one of the weaker parts of it, because it's like, okay, he's fine, but he's just the guy that Blue Beetle fights. There's really no characterization at all, and then at the end, we get all of this in just like a brief but very effective and comprehensive flashback sequence. I'm like, oh, that really changed my mind on him a lot, and he's now this full person who kind of develops a little bit of an understanding with Jaime and rebels against Victoria and drags her into the fire, and they blow up.
Into the fire and flames.
Yep. I thought, they really saved all of his stuff to the end, but it works, I think.
Yeah. And I think we had some, there's some shots that you can tell when they're lingering on someone. You can tell they got something to say, like they're kind of hinting at something festering under the surface, but it's not quite there yet. And we got a few of those with him. So
yes. Yeah. I also really liked Jenny Cord as the co-lead of this movie. She's sort of she's Ted Cord's dad, and Ted was the owner of the business for a while, and then he disappeared. He's presumed dead. And it seems like Jenny is just kind of like a beneficiary of his ownership of the company. But as unrealistic as it often is in the real world, it's nice to have a character who could fight back against the evil of her family's company and move it in a new direction after the villain is dead and she takes over. I also thought it was great that she like kind of is a little bit negligent at the beginning and fucks up, but then by putting Jaime in danger with this scarab, but immediately owns up to it and apologizes and works to make things right, and she bonds with the whole family to the point that they like include her in their big group hug at the end. And she eventually like helps all of them and helps the community and is a really like good person.
Yeah.
You know?
It is a little unrealistic, but as a superhero movie, I'll suspend some disbelief.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed Jenny Cord. She's a good co-lead, or the actress was a good co-lead in this, and it's a good on-screen romance between Jaime and Jenny here too. I know that I kind of said it's a trope earlier, and it's one that kind of I think pulled me a little bit, or didn't speak too much to me personally, but I will acknowledge romantic chemistry on screen when I see it.
Yeah, and like both of them had good romantic chemistry, and there were scenes that actually built both romantic and sexual tension between them, which, as I've said before and earlier in this episode, is becoming distractingly rare, especially in this genre. And you even have like entire groups of young like fans of these types of movies online like saying that sex scenes like make them uncomfortable and they don't want to have them at all, and it's stuff like okay, this is a normal part of human existence, and it's weird that movies are like shying away from putting them in there. I think it's a symptom of two of the biggest franchises in modern geek culture being owned by the Disney Corporation. But I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a half-baked theory. But they were really good in this, and also them flying away together via the Blue Beetle suit was very charming and kind of felt a little like late 2000s for some reason. It felt like a throwback to when we were in like junior high.
Oh yeah, if I had superpowers, I'd fly around with my friend all day, kind of deal.
Yeah, it was just like them flying off like into the sun to go like do something together. It just like reminded me of that era of movies for some reason. I don't know why.
I get that.
Yeah. Also, we get a mid-credits scene that reveals that the original Blue Beetle, Jenny's dad, Ted Cord, is still alive. It cuts back to his like secret lair in the mansion, and the screen comes on, and he kind of desperately is like, "Hey, if you're seeing this, like, tell my daughter her dad's alive. Like, I'm out here somewhere." So that's set up for a sequel that realistically will probably not happen, but I'd like to see happen.
Me too.
But yeah, what you got? Any final thoughts on Blue Beetle?
I think I'd recommend it if you're into superhero films. I think this one, it merits a watch much more than The Flash for sure, or some other superhero movies that we won't name here today. But I think across the genre, I think this one does stand out as something that's genuine and authentic, and I think a lot of people will connect with these characters.
Yeah, it kind of bums me out that Warner Brothers spent all that money and effort marketing The Flash this year when this movie was right here and is much better in every way. And also like apparently is supposed to be part of their new universe anyway. So I don't understand. I know The Flash is a bigger character, but this is a far better movie than The Flash, and I wish this had gotten the care from the studio that movie did, because this one actually deserved it. And I would recommend it too. It's a lot of fun. It's funny. It has heart. And I know a lot of people are sick of this genre. I get it. Go check it out, and check it out anyway, man. You've probably seen all the other big movies that are out right now. Go see this one too. It's fun. I liked it a lot.
That's a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll shift to our last segment of the episode where we talk about other stuff that we've been doing lately, reading, watching, exploring, interacting with. Dylan, what have you been up to lately?
So I read another Sherlock Holmes story, A Scandal in Bohemia. It is only like 16 pages long, and if I'm remembering correctly, it is the only story that features Irene Adler. And that's what's so interesting is every adaptation of Sherlock Holmes, I feel like, features her in such a prominent role. And it's all based on this like one story because I guess she just like took hold of the people who read these stories, and I kind of get why. Like, you only see her on screen for like 2 scenes of the short story, and she leaves a letter, but she outwits Holmes and escapes, and she's the good guy in the story. She's just trying to live her life and move on, and Holmes is hired to like basically steal something from her on behalf of a monarch to like make his marriage arrangements more convenient. It's a great story. It only took me a total of like 45 minutes to read. And it's just so perfectly done. And it's just wild that this character is considered such a massive element in like the Sherlock Holmes universe of lore because she's only in this one story. And I think Moriarty is the same way. I think he's only in 2 stories.
Fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, but it's really good. And I have the complete works, and I'm like slowly reading through them. But if you're just like interested in reading one Sherlock Holmes story, this is probably a good one. Also, continuing to play Baldur's Gate 3. I've played it for 36 hours. I'm almost done with Act 1.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's so good.
That's
also,
a lot in the game.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it's a pretty beefy RPG. Also, continuing on with my adventures with Superman. Only 1 episode left of the season, which really bums me out, but it continues to be delightful, and I love it. It's super fun. And
Sweet.
I'll let you do one of yours, and then we can talk about the last one together for a little bit.
Let's do it.
Because we both watched it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I finished up Secret Invasion, finally. I just watched the final episode the other day, and oh man, I have mixed feelings on the whole thing.
Yeah, it's not very good, is it?
Yeah, mostly I'm disappointed with the series, and I agree with your assessment. If you guys haven't checked out Dylan's video on how they could have improved Secret Invasion, I encourage you to check it out because he makes some great points.
I'll link it in the description.
Yeah, please do, because I think he makes some great points about why this series should have been an Avengers team-up movie instead of this 6-episode series that we got instead. Yeah, I'm not super satisfied with it, but there were some elements that I thought worked okay. Like, I thought the fourth episode was beautiful, but then the last 2 were just not anywhere close to that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's not that great.
Yeah, a little bit of a miss there, but on a brighter note, we got more Star Wars content again. It's never going to stop. Never going to stop. Star Wars. But we got Ahsoka out, and you and I have both watched the first 2 episodes.
Mm-hmm. And we'll do an episode on this when it's done, but we have 2 hours of stuff to talk about, so we'll do a little like thoughts so far. Where are you landing on Ahsoka?
I'm honestly loving it, and I wasn't expecting to. Like, I think that it is just a continuation of Rebels, and it's, if you haven't seen that series, you're going to be lost, unfortunately. When you start this series, you'll be like, who the fuck is Ezra? Who the fuck is Sabine? Like, all these questions and stuff. But it kind of just it doesn't pick up right exactly. It doesn't pick back up right exactly where we left off Rebels in season 4. But it's a little bit later, and I don't know. I'm just liking the originality of it so far, and the antagonists they're cool. I like them a lot.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm more positive on it than I thought I would be, but I'm not loving it.
Sure.
So I have a couple different thoughts. One, the story itself, I am intrigued by. I like the concept of Ahsoka and Sabine teaming up to go find Ezra and Thrawn too, I guess. I like the bad guys. I like the visual parallels to the Phantom Menace, especially with the villains. I thought that was fun. I still maintain, and I will say this repeatedly in our episode, and I'm sure, this should have been a fucking cartoon. I like,
Yes.
and
okay.
Because it is just Rebels Season 5, and I tried watching this with my mom, and her question was, who is Ezra? And then I asked, do you remember who this Ahsoka lady is? And she was like, I remember her hair thing, referring to her head.
Yeah, the fulcrum.
Yeah. So no, she did not remember who Ahsoka was, and she thought it was slow and looked cheap. The makeup specifically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I agree. I do think the makeup looks really cheap, especially on Hera. But I was trying to explain to her, it's like, oh, it is slow, but it feels nice as someone who watched Rebels, because I'm like, oh, we're catching up with these characters that we have all this emotional attachment to. But it doesn't work for your casual fan. And I've been saying this for years about this show since they announced it, because you have now changed medium from animated, which is, in America at least, like inherently more niche, to a live-action television show, and you are asking a lot of your casual fans who did not watch those shows. You're trying to force these characters onto them, and they don't necessarily want them. Not that the characters are bad. They're great. I love them. I love these characters. I still don't feel like live-action Ahsoka feels like Ahsoka. I don't know if you agree, but we'll talk about that more in like a month and a half, I guess.
Yeah.
When it ends. But yeah, thoughts so far. I am intrigued by the story itself. I'm annoyed that it's in live action. I still don't like the live action portrayal of Ahsoka. But I did like, personality-wise, I liked Hera and Sabine. But okay, do you agree with me on this or not? I thought in the dialogue scenes, especially in the second episode, it's like in between every line of dialogue, it's just a beat too long of silence.
I did kind of notice that too, and a part of me it kind of felt a little bit like the Rebels show in a way, because I remember that in Rebels, where it would be like someone says a sentence and then there's silence, and then someone says a sentence, kind of deal. So I feel like maybe that's just a little bit of that. That's my assumption.
Yeah.
That it's just the Rebels format carrying over into live action not so well.
Right, and I think what it might be, not just the Rebels format, but I know Dave Filoni didn't direct both episodes, but I think that might just be his relative inexperience as a live action director. And maybe you need to do that in animation, and a lot of video game dialogue is like that too. It's like one line and then the next line triggers and the next line, but there's no overlap between the dialogue, and it felt very stilted as a result of that. So hopefully that improves throughout the show, because it's just a little bit too long every time.
Yeah, I did kind of notice that a little bit.
But
well, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And we don't have a planned thing for next episode, but we got some things we could see. We could see some Ninja Turtles. We could see that new movie Bottoms, which is supposed to be good. But I don't know. We'll talk about it. We'll figure it out. You guys get a surprise.
Yeah.
We'll see. But until that episode, where can people find you online, Niles?
On Instagram at Niles Got No Styles. Dylan, where can people follow you online?
On Instagram at DylanD1026. On Twitter at D-Day Movies. It's not called X. It's called Twitter. On YouTube at D-Day Movies. And I'll link that Secret Invasion video in the description. On Twitch at D-Day_movies. On Blue Sky at D-Day Movies. And on Threads. I don't remember what my Threads thing is. Don't worry about it. But thank you all so much for watching and or listening. We really appreciate it. Give us a like and a subscribe. Send it to your friends and family if you think they would be interested in what we have to say. Yeah, thank you guys so much for enjoying the show, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.